Welcome back to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast. So this time I wanted to do something a little bit different. This isn't about health or fitness. This episode is about motherhood and how little examples we have for kind of somebody to look up to, how few role models we have, our generation has, and how motherhood is depicted in Hollywood and just in general on our TV screens. And as a kind of prior to this, I really wanted to do this written because I've written a few sort of blog posts on motherhood and on feminism and things like that. And sometimes these things work a little bit better written, but I wanted to give it a go, actually doing it as a podcast episode instead. And a kind of prior to this is a blog post that I wrote a little while ago called Maiden Mother Matriarch. That is about how women have always and still are kind of their lives are defined by three sort of stages of life that are characterized by their reproductive phase. So being a maiden, being an unmarried woman without children, motherhood, obviously having children and becoming a mother, and then matriarch and moving into a stage in our life where we are older women, hopefully wiser, and have a different role in society. And in this blog post, what I talked about is how our society today really glorifies the maiden and kind of has absolutely no status or given to mothers or being a matriarch. It's kind of like at that point you're kind of just used up, and our society today doesn't offer any role models for us to aspire to in those stages. So it's kind of like, it's really glorified that you should be a maiden and this really beautiful young woman. And when you haven't had a baby, you can be this boss bitch or you can be this tough chick. But once you've had a child, you kind of have two options. You either sort of look around you and the only thing there is to aspire to is the maiden role. And so you just have to keep clutching at that and keep trying to be cool, and keep trying to keep up with the fashions and keep trying to go out and drinking until late at night. Keep trying to look as young as possible and dress as young as possible. And often, remain as independent as possible, trying to remain as independent as possible from your children and from your husband, and, potentially get separated or get divorced so that you can have more free time and more more independence. And the only alternative that's offered to us is to kind of just become this sad, this sad woman who just has nothing other than her children and completely loses her sense of identity and loses everything that gives her a sense of herself. And she kind of just drowns in motherhood. So we're kind of offered these two options, which neither are really that appealing, because it's kind of impossible to just stay young and continue behaving like a maiden. You kind of have to break up your family. You kind of have to, not give your children everything that they need in order to play up to live up to that expectation and that role. But the other kind of alternative that's offered to us is to be this kind of like martyr mummy that just completely gives up her own sense of self in order to and gives up all of her own identity in order to serve her children and her husband. And I can understand, like, neither of these roles are very aspirational, but I can certainly understand why more women are drawn towards the maiden than the mother. And something I've been thinking a lot about recently is about how Hollywood provides certain examples for us. And I've just been noticing over the past few years that there are no positive depictions of motherhood on my TV screen, whether it's Hollywood, coming from Hollywood, or whether it's coming from Netflix or other alternative medias. There are no stories of, like really empowering stories of mothers. I think there were up until the 1990s. So one that I can think of is that Sandra Bullock movie, The Blind Side, where she is like this kind of Texan mum, and she adopts this huge black kid who's like really good, turns out to be really good at football, and she kind of takes him under his wing, and through her sort of love and compassion and sort of bringing him into her family, he then thrives and actually has a chance at life. And I think this is like the only example I can really think of off the top of my head of kind of a hero's journey for the mother, right? Being a mother, this particular mother role as well, she's got her own 2 kids and she's got a healthy family. She's got a wonderful relationship with her husband. She's also well put together. She's well dressed. She's fit. She's slim. And she's got a lot of confidence. And this is like a really sort of aspirational role for the mother, like being able to nurture somebody, and through love and compassion, being able to help somebody, a young person, reach their full potential, right? This is like a beautiful hero's journey for the mother. But of course, nowadays, this was made in 2009. So of course, in today's culture, this would be seen as like, a patronizing or matronizing kind of white savior story. So probably wouldn't be all that popular, which I think is a shame, because it kind of takes away from the beautiful like mother adopted son story and the bond that you can have through like motherly love. So anyway, that's the only kind of positive hero's journey for the mother that I can think of that I've ever seen in Hollywood. And what I've started noticing as I sort of watch Netflix and as I watch movies and especially more recent stuff is that there is just no aspirational mother role. All we see is 2 things. You either see this kind of maiden role, often getting extended into midlife, who is kind of a tough chick / boss bitch. That's the kind, but she's an absolute emotional wreck underneath. Or we get images of mothers who are just completely drowning in motherhood, and it's just a completely miserable, isolating role, that's a thankless role, that's just just the most awful torture that you can imagine. And let me just give you a few examples. So I've been rewatching Ozark recently, and Wendy from Ozark is such a good example of this, because she depicts the 2. So when they have the flashbacks to like her life when her kids were younger, she was depressed. She couldn't get out of bed. And one of the things that they go over and over in the Ozarks is how she had to give up her amazing political career in order to have children. And it's something that she deeply regrets. And she always feels like, she put herself to one side in order to raise her family. And it's something that she desperately wants to get back to. And the way that it's talked about also is that, this political career, this, shining political career where she has influence and she has power and she's telling men what to do, that this is really the most fulfilling thing that she can be doing with her life. And that having children was kind of a mistake. Like, there was no fulfillment in it. There was no, there was no sort of enjoyment in it along the way. It was just this really depressing thing where she was really isolated in American suburbia while her husband went out and did the really fulfilling thing of working. And I think this kind of like, as Ozark goes along and her character develops, she kind of reclaims that role of the boss bitch who is like really, really tough and thick-skinned and is bossing men around and is running a big, money laundering operation. And she's really the one pulling the strings, not her husband, Marty. And as the series goes on, she becomes more and more confident, and more of a force to be reckoned with, precisely because she is re-engaging with her career and doing this most fulfilling work of like earning money, even though it's all an illegal operation, and it's all work, with involved in a lot of violence and a lot of crime and completely illegal, and she would go to prison for it. But it kind of glorifies this kind of boss bitch role and really demeans the role of the mother that she then puts aside as she gets more into this money laundering operation. Another great example is Beth from Yellowstone. It just popped up in my feed today. I was just scrolling through YouTube, as you do, looking for a good podcast, and those shorts popped up. And this short popped up of her coming into her family is sitting there at dinner, and she's like, right, there's something I need to do before dinner. She takes everyone outside and she's like, right, we're going to get married right now. And I've seen a bit of Yellowstone. I couldn't keep watching it because it was the most terrible, probably the most terrible series I've ever seen in my life, and the most awful script, and a really great example of how Hollywood and Netflix are creating like kind of propaganda movies rather than actually telling stories that people want to hear. So Beth's character is this kind of real tough chick, boss bitch. Like, she doesn't have children. She's like middle-aged. She's coming up to like 40. She must be around 40. She's a super sexy woman, but she's like this big hot mess, right? She's an alcoholic. She's desperately miserable. And all of this tough chick kind of facade is all about, it's just a cope for her horrible relationship with her mother, who was never nurturing to her, just kind of was like, Beth, you need to be strong, you need to be this, you need to be that. And ultimately her mum completely fucked her up and made her just this miserable hot mess. But what's so interesting, I find, about it is that this hot mess, like Maiden, like train wreck of a woman who is completely destructive in her personal life. She's got this guy, this cowboy, can't remember his name, who's obviously in love with her and she's in love with him, but she's like, no, I can't commit to a relationship. I can't do that whole like married woman, have children thing. She's an absolute prick to her brother, to her younger brother. She's an asshole to her dad. She's just this like hurricane that comes flying in and just wrecks everything. She just destroys like other men in these business meetings, these high-powered men, destroys their lives, destroys their careers, and then just goes storming out. But again, this is what's so interesting about it, is it's kind of an aspirational role. It's kind of this, she's presented as this aspirational role model for women, right? This boss bitch, I don't need anyone, I'm completely independent, I'm not going to have children, all of this stuff, right? Is like, I've got this high-powered career, I've got everyone wrapped around my finger, I'm manipulative, I'm a complete bitch, right? It's presented as this like aspirational role for women. And you see in that scene that I originally mentioned, the short that popped up in my feed where she's like, right, we're getting married now. Like, the guy that she's marrying is just kind of going along for the ride, and he's got this wry smile that's coming out the edge of his mouth, and he's like, oh, Beth, oh, what are you like? This is so you, like, you're so crazy, like, you're so amazing. Like, the implication being that her being this emotional train wreck is like something that he really admires in her and like really, loves her for. And it's completely fucked up, right? It's such the opposite of what we should be aspiring to as women. And I do know a few of those sorts of women in my life that kind of aspire to be that wrecking ball. I mean, and the fact that there is like that pop song, like, being a wrecking ball, like, it's so in our culture, that kind of Taylor Swift, like, I'm this crazy, cool, young, like, girl who like I don't want to commit to a relationship, but now I'm in my 30s and it was kind of cool when I was 22, but now I'm 37. It's all a bit sad, really. Like, it's again just offering us this like aspirational role model that is a complete train wreck that we should not be aspiring to whatsoever. She has no values. She's no center. She's not balanced. She's a complete alcoholic. Like, this is an aspirational role. This is madness. And on the other hand, like, the becoming a mother and settling down and being like, somebody who looks after her children, looks after her family, looks after her husband, is seen as like this, just being a sellout and a pick-me. And I'll give you an example of how I've seen motherhood represented in Hollywood or in movies recently. And there's this, so also in the House of Cards, right? And we could talk about the main character. I can't remember what her name is, but Kevin Spacey's wife. But so she's also this boss bitch, right? They've decided not to have children. She focuses on her career, and her kind of the arc of that character as the series goes on. So it starts off, she has her own career, but she's kind of helping her husband to like build his career and his political power. But eventually, she kind of destroys her husband and then usurps his role, and she becomes like the president of the United States and this like really powerful woman. And again, she's a completely unscrupulous character. She has no morals. She has no values. She cheats on her husband. Her husband cheats on her. They know that. She is a pathological liar. But she's really skinny and sexy and well put together and always perfect and completely as cool as a cucumber. And she's fit. And again, this is an aspirational role for women rather than like a motherhood role. And there's this one episode where she goes knocking on doors to talk to the local people that really jumped out to me. And she walks into this home, and there's this woman holding this like quite big baby, probably like it's supposed to be like a 6-month-old baby or a 9-month-old baby, and the baby's just crying and the woman's like rocking the baby, and she's just a complete mess, right? She hasn't brushed her hair, she hasn't had a shower for a week, and she's just like, oh my god, this is just the most miserable thing. I'm just stuck here looking after this baby all day. This is just so awful, and my husband's out cheating on me, and like I haven't had sex in 6 months or whatever. And she just completely like verbal diarrhea, just starts telling all her problems to this random woman who showed up on her door. And again, this is how Hollywood depicts motherhood, right? Is like whenever motherhood shows up in Hollywood or in Netflix dramas, it's always this thing that's like this really, really miserable, awful thing that no woman should ever want to deal with, and that we need to kind of like opt out of in order to be fully kind of actualized and emancipated individuals. And I think the reason why I've become so like sensitive to these messages now is because I became a mother myself 6 years ago, and now I have 3 children, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 9-month-old. And honestly, motherhood is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me. It's absolutely incredible. There's nothing in my life that has more meaning than my children. And I genuinely really enjoy spending time with them. And is it hard? Yeah, sometimes it's fucking hard. Like having a newborn baby is hard. You're waking up a lot during the night. You're a bit fat from pregnancy. You're unfit. You feel like a bit of a mess. But that passes, and you get your shit together, and you can lose weight, you can work out, you can build your job. I've built my career back up again afterwards. But it's taken a different role in my life because now I'm a mother, and now, the thing that is most important to me each day is spending time with my children and raising my children and doing things with my children. That's just the most enjoyable thing. And my career and my job has become something that is there to support me as to support my children, to give my children the life that I want them to have, to give them everything that they need. And also being fit and being healthy is also, it's important to me. It's important to me to have my own sense of self and to look after me, but it's also important to me to be a role model for my children. And so there's just this massive mismatch between what motherhood actually feels like for me, which is, the most rewarding, the most fulfilling, the most important thing in my life. And then what I'm seeing on TV and how these Hollywood stars are depicting motherhood as though it's the most awful thing in the world. And it's like, no wonder, the birth rates have plummeted. It's no wonder. I mean, I don't think, if you know, but like the birth rates have now in the Western world are below replacement levels. So like in the UK, I know they're around 1.44. So they've dropped massively from like the 1970s when they were over replacement levels. And this is going to lead to population collapse. Like, I don't think people aren't talking about this, but this is a major issue that is going to come up in the coming years and the coming generations, because if we're not producing enough children, we're not going to be, there's not going to be enough, you're going to have an aging population, where, aging old people are incredibly expensive, and there aren't going to be enough young people paying taxes into the system to be able to support them. I live in Israel, so this is where things are different here, right? And there is a different kind of motherhood hero's journey that I think Israelis have kind of internalized, and it's not depicted here as this, awful, horrible thing. It's seen as like, it's still seen in many ways as like the role of women. And, I think because there is the reality of war in this country, you actually have men and young men and husbands, like my husband going off and fighting in a war. And then you have the women at home who really have to do the work to, raise children and keep everything going at home in the absence of husbands who are literally fighting for our existential, like for our existence. And there are endless examples going back to Hollywood, right? There are endless examples. Everything I can think of that I've seen as depicted motherhood either depicts this wild card, boss bitch, tough chick, independent woman, or it depicts this kind of really miserable, like wife and mother who is just drowning in motherhood. And just a couple more examples is a Netflix drama called Godless, where all the men are killed and then all the women have to step up in this like Wild West drama, and they have to like protect themselves. Again, it's seen as like a hero's journey of look at all these women, running the show and whatever. There was a K-drama, like a Korean program that I watched recently, where there was this mother who was just this subservient mother who her husband just like shouted at her and told her what to do. And she raised her kids, and she was a stay-at-home mum, and she was completely subservient to everyone. And then she had this big awakening, and she decided to go back to work, being a doctor. And as she finds herself through her career and through working 100-hour weeks, and then she divorces her husband. And along the way, there's this romance with this younger doctor. And the final episode is like, she finally can get together with this like a guy where she's had all this sexual tension with throughout the whole thing. And she says, actually, no, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to be with anyone. I just want to do it on my own. And that's the kind of hero journey. If you compare it to Disney movies of like the 1980s and before, where it was like, they fell in love and then they got together and then they were happily married, happily ever after. Now it's like, no, now I decided I don't need no man, and now I'm going to live happily ever after as this independent boss bitch. Another foreign drama. So this is all within the Western canon, right? So South Korea is like is still within the scope of Western culture. And I got really into Danish program, and there's endless, in Danish drama, there are endless examples of this, but one that really stands out to me is Borgen, which is this Danish drama about this woman who is the leader of a political party in Denmark, and she becomes the prime minister, And she's very happily married. She's got this lovely relationship with her husband. She's got 2 wonderful kids. But then because of her position of power and the amount that it demands of her, her husband breaks up with her. She has this divorce, and then she overcomes the divorce and she continues on with her political career and becomes, an enlightened individual through her career rather than through motherhood and community and family. And just one final example is that Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio movie Revolutionary Road, where they fall in love and they have all these dreams and she's a dreamer, and then they get married, they have kids. They settle down in suburbia. He gets a good job offer. She gets stuck in the home. She's basically suicidal and just can't, and super depressed and isolated in this, golden cage of suburbia. But he's getting satisfaction because he's got this high powered job and he's getting more money, and she wants to move to Paris. And I think in the end she kills herself and kills her children or something like that. But it depicts how miserable motherhood is. And Moana is another great example of this kind of boss bitch journey, where instead of staying at home and doing what her ancestors did and listening to her father and having children and raising the next generation and becoming the chief, she disobeys her father. She goes out into the world and then she saves the world because of her disobedience. So this is kind of the kind of social aspiration of the activist today. So basically, in sum, there is this massive mismatch between what is depicted on TV of motherhood and what the aspirational roles of women should be. There's a mismatch between that and then the actual reality of being a mother. And there are no aspirational kind of role models for us on our TV screens to show us what it might look like being this kind of woman who, she has children and she has a family and maybe she works as well, but she finds a lot of fulfillment in being a mother and raising a family and having children, and she doesn't lose herself in it. She doesn't become a mummy martyr. She doesn't have to give up on herself. She can still pursue her hobbies. She can still pursue her goals, even if they're, fitness goals and aesthetic goals. She doesn't have to become this frumpy, middle-aged, unattractive woman. She can actually still have a sense of self and have a wonderful relationship with her children and with her partner and with her wider family and with her community. This kind of aspirational role now is never depicted. This aspirational role of sort of being a member of society, being a member of your community, and being, a good mother, but also not completely losing yourself in motherhood. That isn't depicted. And when I can imagine, even as I'm saying this, many women sort of see that as kind of giving up or giving in or settling. But actually, if you really do lean into it, it is the most amazing thing you'll ever experience. Becoming a mother is the most amazing, most important, most fulfilling experience you'll ever have in your life. And doing that with a loving partner is absolutely incredible. And then the love and the bond and the bond that can grow between the two of you and between your children, and the bond that you can have as a family can be absolutely incredible. But that isn't depicted in Hollywood. It isn't depicted on our screens. What is depicted is either, when motherhood is depicted, it's depicted as this isolating, miserable, horrible, subservient role where, your husband's going to be cheating on you because your vagina's ruined, and your children are going to hate you, and you have a screaming baby all day long, every day, which, babies cry, but it's not just 24/7 crying all the time. If that's the case, they sleep, they eat, they smile, they do other things. So either motherhood is depicted as that and this depressing thing where she wants to kill herself and whatever. Or the alternative is this boss bitch, kind of tough chick role where, you know, they're always where this is an alternative to motherhood where, you know, you're a career driven woman, you get all your fulfillment from your career. But often these women that are being depicted, the ironic thing that I find interesting is that they are, you know, they are fucked up. They are, you know, like they have emotional issues that and attachment issues, and they often are addicted to alcohol or drugs. I mean, think of Homeland, like the main character of that, like it's this really it's really strange to me that is considered the aspirational, you know, hero's journey of the woman today. You know, don't have children, don't have a partner, have a career. You know, through your career, you're going to find fulfillment. But yeah, I mean, I could kind of accept that. But the fact that they always have emotional baggage and some kind of addiction and some kind of mental health disorder, and they're this kind of like real hot mess. Like I'm not quite sure why that is considered so aspirational, being this person who has, you know, attachment issues and like, oh, I just can't be in a relationship because I'm just too messed up and I just can't trust anyone. Like, I don't understand why in our culture that is considered to be an aspirational role or an aspirational kind of archetype. So I guess what I'm trying to say in this podcast is that, you know, I think that women are suffering the fallout of this. I work with a lot of women as well who are trying to find kind of self-actualization and fulfillment through their careers. And now that they have children, they're trying to work as though they don't have children. And they are feeling constantly strung out and constantly, you know, too thinly spread. And I just think that, you know, 99% of women are going to have children, and a lot of them are going to have, like, hopefully have children with a partner and with the father of the children where they can raise them together. I think that's the best outcome for everyone, best outcome for children. But we don't have any role models to aspire to, right? It's not on our TV screens. Motherhood is kind of degraded and talked about as though it's this awful, horrible thing. And then also, if we look towards our own mothers, they often, the boomer generation, they often don't provide much of a role model either. Often they're suffering from deadbeat grandmother syndrome, or they're trying to, now that they're in their retirement years, they want to live a life of leisure where they don't have any responsibilities to their children and to their grandchildren. And they want to go on cruises and have dinner parties and be swingers or whatever else they want to do behind closed doors, and kind of find self-actualization through those kind of things rather than through their family and community. And so I just want to offer, I don't know, some kind of alternative to that aspirational mother role, kind of the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, and that it's going to apply to most women, because most women are not going to find fulfillment and self-actualization through their careers. Look, some women are going to be Marie Curie and are going to find the cure for cancer and are going to do incredibly, you know, meaningful things for society through their career. But the vast majority of women are not going to find that kind of fulfillment through their careers, and they're going to find that fulfillment through their families and through their children. So we need to start having more aspirational role models for the typical woman who wants to get married and have children and raise them, but also doesn't want to become part of this hot mess mum culture where you just kind of give up on yourself, you let yourself go, you get frumpy, you get kind of fat, you get kind of unattractive, and you just let gravity take its toll and you kind of give up on yourself. And that is not an aspirational role. We need to have an aspirational, like, role model for women where, you know, maybe you are juggling a career with having a family, but maybe you're working part-time because you're trying to also be a mother and raise children and take care of the home. And you do have your shit together. You know, you do lose the weight after having a baby. You do get fit and strong again after having a baby. You're strong physically and mentally. You know, you're not spread thinly. I think one of the biggest ailments of our time is that everyone is so busy all the time. There's not a moment in the day to just chill, to just think, to just kind of have a little bit of downtime. We feel like we have to fill every second of our days. We have to work 40 hours a week while we raise 3 young children. We have to have hobbies. We have to go to the gym. We have to like just always be cramming things in rather than kind of just taking a slightly slower pace of life, opting out of the rat race and opting out of, you know, the frenzied consumerism that everyone is just, you know, not purposefully, but just falling into, where we have to choose a different way and we have to have alternative, aspirational guides for women, in this stage of life. And so this is kind of just a continuation of that conversation. I haven't offered much in the way of like solutions or conclusions, but it's a conversation that I want to continue to have, this idea of the Maiden Mother Matriarch, this idea of how we find meaning in motherhood, how we reclaim motherhood as, you know, a meaningful journey that women, you know, are proud of taking and and take with grace and elegance and composure, I think is the word that I'm looking for. So let me know what you think about this podcast. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if you have any solutions, if you have any ideas, if you want to continue the conversation. I'd be really interested to know what you think about what I said in this podcast.